If you were to guess which weapon type in Genshin Impact would be considered the worst, what would it be? There are 5 different weapon classes as of version 2.4. Swords, claymores, polearms, bows, and catalysts. The game doesn't have as wide of a roster as other gacha titles, only releasing about 1 or 2 characters per month. But there are a good number of units per weapon type, and while they don't have as much of an impact in the game's combat as elements, I feel like it warrants a bit of discussion. Just recently I uploaded an episode on why no one plays Lisa, marking the 3rd Catalyst user of the series up till now. It's not just her, Kokomi and Klee either. Barbara, Ningguang, and Yanfei struggle with their own problems too, which prompted me to make this video. The Catalyst is arguably the worst weapon type in Genshin. Currently, the only widely used characters with that weapon type are Sucrose and Mona. The rest are either below average or niche at best, not to mention it's the smallest in size, albeit only by 1. The other 4 weapons typically have 1 or 2 characters that immediately come to mind when you think of the strongest. For bows, it's Ganyu, Venti, Child. For claymores, it could be Eula or maybe Ito. For polearms, it's a no-brainer, there's like 50 of them. Same with swords. A plethora of very dominant and versatile units. But even if you were to pit the best Catalyst users against their counterparts, I feel like no one can say in good conscience that it's as good as the others. Today we're going to discuss the issues behind Catalyst. Is the weapon holding its wielders back, or is it fine and the problems lie within the characters themselves? Let's see what we can find out. So, one of the positive aspects of this game lies in its simplicity. As far as actives are concerned, each character has a basic attack, charge attack, plunging attack, elemental skill, and elemental burst. In terms of equipment, they have their weapon and 5 artifacts, and basic combat entails the usage of combining elements together. It's very beginner friendly. You don't have to understand complex mechanics or macro like you would in a MOBA, nor do you have to memorize combos and precise button inputs using quarter circles like you would in a fighting game. As for the actual stats of the equipment itself, the weapons could not be more basic. They have an attack stat, a secondary stat, and a passive property. Some that offer rudimentary benefits, like Wolf's Gravestone, giving you extra attack power. Mind you, it's a lot of friggin' attack power, but it's just attack power. Others can completely alter the way a character plays, such as the 4 sacrificial weapons, which share the ability of having a percentage chance to reset your elemental skill cooldown upon cast, game-changing for certain units. The weapon types themselves have basic standards of design. Swords have short range but fast attack speed and moderate damage. Claymores have long range and high damage but slow attacks. However, they're more effective at damaging solid objects like ores or shields on monsters. Polearms are the most balanced when it comes to power, speed, and range. Bows have very long-range attacks. Instead of having a standard charge attack, they have aim shot, turning your game into a third-person shooter for more precise aim, and can be turned into elemental attacks on full charge. Then we have Catalysts, another ranged weapon. They're essentially this game's form of magic. As such, their normal charge and plunging attacks by default deal elemental damage based on whatever vision they carry. Mona's Hydro, so her Catalyst does Hydro damage, Sucrose's Anemo, so her Catalyst does Anemo damage, so on and so forth. Unlike the 4 physical weapons, each caster has their own way to inflict damage through catalysts, giving more individuality from character to character. For example, Barbara's auto attacks conjure bursts of water at the nearest enemy. Ningguang fires projectiles that travel in a straight line. Klee doesn't even use her catalyst, she just throws bombs from her backpack. But regardless of how the normal attacks are animated, Catalyst users employ the same lock-on system as bows, just at less range. As for the charge attack, it differs as well, each with their own unique functions, though usually it consists of a condensed burst of elemental damage in a small area directly in front of them. As the only weapon that inflicts elemental damage by default, Catalyst users are placed in an interesting situation. On one hand, they're capable of achieving elemental reactions unconditionally through their auto attacks, which is a big deal as bow users have to expend time charging an aim shot, while melee weapons have to be imbued through external means. On the other, it means they're exclusively locked to their original element and cannot be changed by other means. For example, if you take a sword user like Kuting and activate her elemental skill, her attacks convert into electro damage. If she stands on top of C6 Bennett's Fantastic Voyage, her attacks become imbued with pyro. Chongyun's elemental skill can make her do cryo damage, so on and so forth. Then again, most of the time every unit prefers to stick to one element anyway, so it's not a big weakness, but it is worth mentioning. Now, going by this information alone, there doesn't appear to be any ostensible problem regarding the weapon itself. In fact, some of them are pretty good at helping your team in combat. For instance, the most popular weapon of choice for support units like Barbara or Mona is the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, a 3-star weapon with a very effective passive, especially at max refinement. Whenever they swap out, the new character taking their place gets a boost of 24 to 48% attack for 10 seconds, and given that it's a 3-star weapon, that is not bad at all. Everyone should have access to at least one R5 Tails by this point. So then, what's up with Catalyst users, and why do they see much less play than the other weapon types? Is it purely just coincidence, or is there something fundamentally wrong with the weapon? It's honestly kind of both. At its core design, Genshin Impact is an action RPG hack-and-slash type game. By default, melee weapons are the standard, as the only stipulation for using them correctly is to be right in your opponent's faces, which we're planning on doing anyway. Bows have the luxury of an aim shot mode, temporarily moving the camera to simulate a third-person shooter point of view, thus allowing you to directly aim at whatever target you want to prioritize. Where this becomes a problem for Catalyst is that it touches on the one game mechanic in Genshin that's either sorely missing or underdeveloped: targeting. For the sake of argument, in Nier Automata, you're operating your character as well as a pod that assists you in battle. That pod is equipped with a gun that can shoot a flurry of bullets and whatever armament you decide to equip it with. By pressing the L2 button in lower difficulties, the pod will automatically begin to lock onto an enemy, and you can use your right analog stick to change who it should be focusing on. This is especially important when facing aerial enemies and your only hope of defeating them is by using your pod's gun. Moreover, this allows the pod to attack a target without requiring you as the player or the camera angle to directly be facing the enemy in question. In other words, you can run and strafe side to side while the pod does all the work for you. I say all this because in the context of Genshin, there's no supplemental lock-on feature besides hit scan, which is horribly inconsistent. Bow users circumvent this by staying in aim shot most of the time, but Catalyst users do not have this feature, preventing them from being able to selectively choose who they want to attack. You might think this is only a problem when facing a cluster of enemies, but it can also come into play while in single target matchups. There's no way to tell who you're locked onto or whether you're in range to lock onto anyone at all. So despite being ranged attackers, the lack of proper targeting indicators make Catalyst the most inconsistent and inaccurate weapon type of the 5. Those with projectiles, such as Ningguang and Yanfei, fly much slower than arrows, so they actually have the chance of missing or being intercepted by other enemies. Adding onto its poor usability, despite being a very integral part of most of their kits, Catalyst users have very poor combat fluidity. Not saying they're bad in the sense of attack speed, not entirely anyway, but in terms of how it flows with the rest of your party, it's a little unintuitive. Just about every melee unit's attack pattern involves a gradual forward advance in position as they knock enemies further back. Bow units do the opposite, gradually stepping backwards to account for enemies walking towards them, but Catalyst users remain in place the entire time and have a slower rate of fire. Normally that would entail a higher base damage value like claymores, but sadly that's not the case. Charge attacks can't easily be woven into normal attacks like you can on melee. To demonstrate, whenever you wish to use a charge attack on someone like Klee, she begins her normal attack windup but then cancels it midway to switch animations. On Hu Tao, and by extension everyone else, the first attack comes out quickly and then switches to a charge attack, allowing her a very fluid 1-2 combo. Ke as well, normal attack then charge attack. Child's melee combo is 3 normal attacks and then a charge attack. They transition seamlessly from one to another. Catalyst users don't. There's a lot of dead time in between different moves that you have to animation cancel, and that can narrow the margin for error. If memory serves, the clunky animation issue was addressed later on with Yanfei and Kokomi, but they're still tethered to all the other issues. The only instance where Catalyst combat isn't too much of a problem is if you're ironically not using them whatsoever. Sucrose exists mainly to use her elemental skill and burst, not so much her normal attacks. Due to this, it's kind of difficult to design a team around a Catalyst main DPS, not that there are that many of them to begin with, and it's also why all the good ones are supports instead. As far as practical elements go, it doesn't get that much better. For one, Catalysts have a universal 50 stamina cost on their charge attacks. All the coaching mains complain about a 25 stamina cost, while the Catalyst mains sit over there with twice that amount. Factor in your sprinting to reposition, and you can only really get 3 or 4 attacks in a given rotation at most. That said, a few of them do have ways to bypass this cost. Ningguang's backup plan lets her use her charge attack for free after a normal one if she has a Star Jade. But remember what I said about Catalyst's attack patterns. She can't transition from a normal attack to a charge attack as smoothly as melees can. Klee's Pounding Surprise has a 50% chance of augmenting her next attack to do 1.5 times more damage and cost no stamina, but it's not 100%. One other thing is their poor synergy. A lot of powerful supportive abilities were designed with the melee damage dealer in mind. Xingqiu's Rain Cutter is a good case of this. Everyone knows he's able to trigger easy hydro reactions because normal attacks trigger consecutive rain sword hits. When paired up with say Hu Tao, she uses a normal attack first and then a charge attack, thus proccing the rain swords every other hit. Bow users in Catalyst can't use Xingqiu as comfortably because they can either only use normal attacks or aim shot/charged ones, never both one after another, and Catalyst users rely on charge attacks very much. For those with on-field effects, such as Xiangling's Pyronado or Bennett's Circle, that involves you being at point-blank range to make use of it. The former is useless if you're far away, and you won't be able to make much use of the latter either, as your goal is to usually kite enemies which will force you out of that circle. This is usually remedied with the usage of crowd control like Venti or decoys like Ganyu, but the fact that they don't have free access to all of those makes them far less desired over someone who does. As far as the average player is concerned, Catalyst users have the worst quality of life issues in the game. Action RPGs with no universal cooldown will inherently favor those with higher capacity for rushdown. That's why mages are usually really powerful or have some extra benefit in similar games to make up for the loss of mobility or speed. It doesn't have to even be in hack and slashers. Take League of Legends. The most popular classes in that game are fighters and slayers because they have a strong mix of damage, defense, and/or mobility, allowing them to steamroll over their opponents with sheer force. However, to level the playing field, mages are gifted with extraordinary area coverage and zone control with abilities that can single-handedly win a team fight. In Genshin, the quote-unquote mage class has nothing over the other ones. They don't excel in area coverage. Kazuha is one of the best at crowd control and uses a sword. Ganyu has a humongous shower of ice and she's a bow user. They certainly don't excel in damage. Range is poor for them too, they're objectively worse than bow users. That's why the majority of the community doesn't find them worth investing into. Everyone plays with the same rules, but Catalyst users have extra handicaps purely by virtue of what weapon they use. Hypothetically, a lot of this could be solved the same way every problem can be solved, systems changes. They've done system changes before with Geo by making it stronger universally, and they've made transformative elemental reactions stronger too. So we know they're definitely open to doing balance and gameplay changes. The question then becomes, how? I think what makes this not as easy as it looks is the current roster. Let's face it, 5 stars are better than 4 stars when it comes to damage. There's no way in hell anyone can unironically say Ningguang, Sucrose, or Yanfei are as viable as Ayaka, Shogun, or Hu Tao. I don't care who they are. Supportively, they do a fantastic job. Everyone knows Sucrose's budget Kazuha. Mona is still the vaporized queen, and Kokomi can let you face tank Spiral Abyss without risk. The problem is, there's only 3 5-star Catalyst users in the game right now, and 2 of them are more of a support than a damage dealer, leaving us with just Klee. It's much harder to pinpoint where Catalyst falls short from an offensive standpoint, as Klee's way of handling combat is rather niche. So what I think can be done to make the class more popular is at the very least to make them feel better to play. 3 changes come to mind. First, the very obvious exorbitant stamina cost. I understand thematically why. You're conjuring spells which take up a lot of energy, but it really doesn't have to be so high, especially since it's not that much different from a melee charge attack. If it did more damage, then yeah, absolutely. Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam do less damage than Fire Blast, Thunder, and Blizzard, but they're more accurate. Basic rule of power budget. Second, have its attack pattern function the same way as melee's, where a normal attack comes out first, even if you hold the skill, and potentially shorten the animation time in between. Were that to happen, it could address the clunky nature of their normal rotation and have it fit in line with everyone else. Third, more area coverage. They have less range than bows, yet share the same property of their normal attacks not being AoE. Bows are allowed to in exchange for superior range, but Catalyst should be allowed to strike multiple targets without need for a charged hit. 90% of our gameplay is dealing with clusters of enemies. Sometimes you don't have enough stamina or low enough cooldowns to clear them fast, which is why melee characters are so good. They do damage to everything around them. Catalyst users should be allowed to do that as well. I fail to understand how bursts of energy inflict less collateral damage than the swing of a sword or a spear. It just doesn't make sense. That'd be the same as Pyro being the healer element while Hydro is the damage one. My guess is the best way to truly see where the Catalyst and its users stand in the power rankings is by getting more of them. They have the most amount of customization between attacks, so maybe in the future we might see some really good ones, but that might also just be due to the character itself being overpowered, not their weapon type. Kinda like how Shogun is super broken, but Electro as an element is kinda meh. Regardless, I want to hear what thoughts you guys have on this matter, and to those of you who main a Catalyst user, what are some positive things about them you think people should be aware of? There might be something the general public doesn't know about, so let us know. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, consider following me on Twitter, joining my Discord server, and checking out my previous discussion videos if you haven't yet. But until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.